Hello, welcome to another episode of Stephen Recommends. Today we're talking about Unhallowed Metropolis, and I am a undertaker looking for his next bounty. Joining me this week is a crazy psychic cop lady named Slaya Nimoy, and a dampier who's just looking to feed on his next virgin named John Pruitt.
I don't think he's a dampier. I think he's a ghostbuster
He's a
who's
ghostbuster.
smoking a little bit too much.
They
He's
don't have to have virgins
he's
at all.
also he's also a ghostbuster who's been smoking too many ghosts.
There's no such thing, and you goddamn well know it.
So today we're talking about Unhallowed Metropolis, and for this episode we're actually trying to try again to get some more structure down with it. So bear with us. We are going to be first talking about the world of Unhallowed Metropolis as well as the basic mechanics. So for the world, it's basically like a post-apocalyptic Victorian London. It's like the apocalypse already happened, and then everyone's rebuilt, and now society is working again, but it's working under Victorian values. Slaya here has a few choice words about the history and how there's some massive plot holes, but if you ignore those, it's fine. It's fine.
Do you want me to go into that?
You can go into it a little bit, sure, but yeah.
Okay, just a disclaimer. I am a history major, so my feelings on this are incredibly biased. Stupidly biased. Um, Basically, the whole idea is that there was a zombie apocalypse in about 1901, I think, or 1900.
1915, I think.
No, it was earlier than. It was before the war. It was way before the war. It was
Right.
around the time Queen Victoria died. There was a zombie apocalypse, and naturally the world fell apart. It happened because of the blight in the world, and a ragtag band of survivors in basically every country had to hold off the zombies and rebuild society. And after 100 years of keeping them at bay, they were able to fortify their cities enough, get rid of enough zombies that they could start living again and start rebuilding. And so during the I'm getting my years wrong, I'm sorry, I should really pull up the book. But basically, during that time, things like not only zombies appeared, but vampires, Frankenstein monsters, ghouls, uh,
Ghosts.
ghosts, any sort of gothic, horror, penny dreadful thing you can think of. But the biggest plot hole is that the developers really wanted to stress this Victorian setting, this neo-Victorian setting with a Tesla punk vibe. And so they decided, even though there was this 100-year period where everyone had to basically work together and men and women were equals, poor and rich were equals, aristocrat and common people were equals, for some reason, when the city was finally rebuilt, they decided, oh, we're going to revert back to Victorian idealism with class structure, some imperialistic viewpoints, and it just doesn't make any sense. And other people have complained about this, like, it's a fun setting. If you just ignore some of these weird things where you're just sitting there going, if people were so equal, then why didn't they stay equal, as they do in most apocalyptic settings?
Hmm.
I mean, it
Unless you
has
turn
been 200 years. Is it like a statement about capitalism and how capitalists inevitably become richer than the others? Or is
Well,
it
see,
just we'd like to be queen now?
that's the thing is they put the aristocrats back in power who aren't capitalists. In fact, the industrialists are still looked down on to a degree by the aristocrats. So they're like the nouveau riche, and are like the middle class and lower class look up to them because they're common people who became upper class as opposed to just aristocrats who are born into it.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
will
gonna lie. I treated the history of this world like I was a citizen in 1984. Anything before the current war is just medieval history. It's fine. Jet engines were invented in medieval history.
yeah. I will give it credit for one thing though. They still keep the whole women and men are equal, and they don't try to like pass it off as Victorian hysteria. As I'm sure if you really, really wanted to be in a Victorian setting.
Yeah,
I'm
Women would
sure
be
there are
awful.
games out there where women are treated as Victorians were, and I'm sure we aren't going to talk about them.
We're
No.
probably not. So basically, yeah, this world is full of every sort of pain dreadful monster you could want. You got your homunculi, your Igors who are just creating life. Got mad scientists making Frankensteinian monsters. You've got vampires stalking the streets and eating people. In fact, there's this entire thing in the history where it's like, oh yeah, there was a big problem like about 50 years ago with vampire prostitutes just feeding on people and causing massive outbreaks of vampirism. On top of that, there's zombies everywhere. There's ghouls living in the sewers who eat babies sometimes. There's
Sometimes.
these sometimes. Usually they're pretty okay. um, there's these werewolf-like things, like some sort of cross between a werewolf and a super soldier mutant thing called thropes that are like like furry versions of the Hulk and just become these horrible furry monsters whenever they get super upset and mad. And all of this is just stalking the streets of this Victorian style London where you got the aristocrats playing petty political games. You've got the lower class struggling just to survive in this horrible area, in this horrible place. You've got these monster hunters called undertakers going around trying to make a living by basically just hunting monsters and bringing them in for bounty. You've got criminals running around stealing things and just trying to get by. You've got these gothic beauties known as mourners whose job it is just to decapitate animates. You've got you can even play mad scientists. You've got all sorts of things going on here. It's like just a giant penny dreadful system, and it feels very fun to play. It's a really cool world to explore, and it's all the right notes of gothic steampunk and Tesla punk.
Tesla punk, and you have to add that you're actually contained to the city of London, and the way that happens is because the blight, the smog, is still around, covering the rest of the land. There's zombies. There's these uncharted territories where you step out, the wastelands, right? It's called the wastelands.
Basically, everything outside of London and other fortified cities is a blighted wasteland where you can go and you can play, but it's basically just saying, welcome to hard mode, anything could be out here, and all of it is trying to kill you. As well as your super powerful electrical stuff doesn't really work anymore, and bullets you're going to run out of eventually. So, yeah, you're going to get screwed if you stay out here too long. So just do a short expedition, get back to the city where it's safer.
But it's important to note that you can't travel to other countries because they are also under this blight trying to recoup. Like, there's no contact with America. What's going on in France? Don't ask.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest gripes with the system, is you just get punished for walking off the map in an FPS. Like, oh no, there's nothing out there. Fucking nothing.
See, that's the thing, though, is that if you want to do world building and stuff, you can go to these other countries or start there, because they do put some information in on them, but they're mostly weird things are happening there. You probably, and we're not going to go into detail of it, so we can have some gray zone where you can just sort of do your own thing if you want to, as well as other places that are there's other cities even in England that you can get to. Usually, though, if you want to get there, you got to go by train, because that's the safest method of travel, and even then it's not super safe.
See, I would disagree with you. I think it's more gray, as in they don't want you to go. They want you to stay in London and imprison you there. So they say, oh yeah, it exists because we need to acknowledge that it exists, but otherwise, just don't go there. We don't have any information for you, and oh, it's worse than you can imagine. Don't leave the city. You're going to die,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's
And that
that.
works in
I think the only
poor people would definitely believe. I was much fairer to you, Steven, in my review of the game than when I was your player. 'Cause as a player, I was an asshole. I would just go, do we have an ionosphere? Then I can hear radios from France. Shut the fuck up!
See, the thing with the world is there are places where it's very clear that they don't want you to go, and that's places like America where it's like, yeah, it's so far away, don't try to go there. It's off. We've lost contact with them. China is literally just has blacked out, and no one knows what's going on there. But other places like France has a surprising amount of information, despite it like really telling you not much. Where it's sort of like this weird like fascist state that that allows anyone to enter but allows no one to leave. Or like Prussia is this sort of weird militaristic state that is actually has in the past tried to attack Britain and failed. And then there's Africa, which is just the biggest wasteland of all time, and is ripe if you want to go on if you've got the balls to go on an expedition into Africa to try to find what was left behind when everything got destroyed, or to just hunt big game, like some of the foulest monsters that the wasteland has to offer. But yeah, for the most part, they do want you to stay in London because that's where they have the most information and the most to work with.
Okay, so let's talk about the city of London then.
Right.
So, I mean, it's broken off into sections. There's a map in the book. You don't have the book. I'll go get the book. So hold on a second.
I'm all PDFs.
Well, John and I, let's talk about London while she's getting the book. It's basically, it's for being just one city, it's huge. There is a lot to work with in this city. There's all sorts of sections. You got your upper class section, your lower class section, your industrialist section, and your immigrant section.
No, yeah, we're kind of complaining about it as if it was a game and there was no map over there. But realistically, this was designed as a city exploration RPG.
Yeah, it's definitely an urban RPG.
Rewards for staying. As bad as the outside is, the inside has cooler stuff.
Yeah, of course.
So this is Unhallowed, the book. There are 2 books. We probably should have started with this.
We'll talk about Necropolis another time.
Oh, I plan on
talking about it another time. Okay, but by the way, people, Necropolis exists. This has got all the ghosties and the psychics and all the really fun stuff. But this is the main book, Unhallowed Metropolis. It's got a guy with what is that called again? Oraculum on the cover, and we will talk about that in the next segment.
And we should clarify it's the revised version. The original version is borderline unplayable.
The revised version is much, 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 much better.
Like, there were silver tip weapons in the inventory, and they were super expensive, but then they forgot to include them in vampiric combat rules, so there was no reason for them.
Exactly.
They shouldn't exist.
So I think we'll talk about the city of London a bit, but we should move on to the next segment of this, where we're going to talk about the sorts of characters you play and how the game plays.
Can you see it?
Yeah, you can see it.
It's the map of London. What?
Yeah, map of London. It exists, and London's a really big place. So let's go into talking about the minute-to-minute gameplay as well as what sorts of characters that you can make, and we'll talk about how they interact with London a bit as we talk about the characters. So character options, you've got a pretty good array of classes to work with, though they're not classes in the traditional sense, like you're going to be locked into playing your role. Like if you're playing a doctor, you're not some sort of just healbot cleric sort of thing. Things are malleable, and basically you can pick up skills that might be outside of your normal realm of possibility in order to make a more well-rounded character, as well as to make it so that you're not a one-note character. The building of a character, the classes basically give you perks and different starting money, as well as different starting skills and other things like that, to give you sort of this is your role, and if you work towards that role, you'll have a lot of things that will help you with it, but you're not locked into it super hard.
Okay. So
we should talk about
some of the classes that are available. Let's talk about that. So first off is an aristocrat, of course. You can play as one of the upper class, and you're just basically there to be the guy who gets people into places, as well as to be the face of the party, usually.
So you do have to give a warning about the aristocrat class, because of all the classes, it is probably the hardest to play if you're playing more along the lines of a dungeon crawl game. But if you're going for a parlor LARP setting where there's a completely more of a social vibe than just a, oh boy, let's go kill monsters, aristocrats are fantastic. But if if you're there to kill monsters, you should probably lean more towards a Dampier if you want to have that charming class with a killer instinct.
Yeah, the strength of the aristocrats is definitely that they know people. Like, you're going to say at some point, how dare you, sir? I'm writing a letter to my MP.
Exactly. How dare you, sir? I will write a letter to my uncle who is in Parliament.
Well, I'm an anarchist and I don't care. I'm trying to blow up Parliament. So here's a bullet to the brain.
Yeah, exactly.
I should say, though, that my favorite character I've ever seen was a custom aristocrat who was just a preacher of these Ukrainian refugees from the Prussian War. And he didn't have any connections. His strength was that he had a bunch of poor people who liked him. So every once in a while, he would arouse them to burn something down. He would just give a fiery speech in tongues, which was just Ukrainian, and then they burn some stuff down.
Aristocrats can't be strong. So other things that you got doctors who are basically like mad scientists. You can make drugs, make Frankenstein monsters, Igors, other things, all sorts of things. They're fun. They're an intellectual class. They're the ones who are going to know everything, as well as basically just have projects for themselves up to like, oh, here's my army of created life. Have fun. You've got detectives who are exactly what they sound like, but they're also got some variety in them. You can make a cop, you can make a private investigator, investigative journalist, etc. They're pretty fun to play. And they can make for good like investigative campaigns if you want to do something more noirish. Criminals are your stereotypical rogues, but the thing is they got they also have lots of maneuver, a lot of flex in them, allowing them to like be, people who rob from the upper class by having an upper class identity and going to parties and then stealing things. You could be just a lower class person who just sort of scrapes along at the bottom and tries to get by. There's all sorts of things you can do with criminals. They're very fun to play.
Then you have a Death Watch soldier, which is basically the Death Watch is an army to destroy all the animates, which are the zombies. Very straightforward. You can play anywhere between a private to... You don't get to play general, but I think you get to play...
No, you can play general.
You can play... Well, it's very expensive to be a general, but you can play a general. Then you have the Dampier. They're vampire hunters, even though they're half vampires, mostly because they resent being half vampires.
They're also the absolute most flexible class in the game because being a vampire hunter is like the most like, okay, sure, you're a vampire hunter and you're a half vampire, but what else? So like they have so much customizability within that. You could literally be anything you wanted to be with those guys. And
you have a certain amount of leeway with the aristocratic sense of the world. Like when someone tries to stop you on the street, why are you shooting a rifle in the middle of town? Just go, vampires, that way. Hunter S. Thompson your way through the situation.
The problem is, if you try to do that to aristocrats, they might be like, oh, you're hunting vampires? Well, I must call the police about that because we can't have that because we love vampires.
No, and that's where you pull out the card of, I am the police.
Oh, no.
Okay, and then there's two other classes in the main core rulebook. There's the Undertaker, which is not an Undertaker. One of you want to explain this one?
They literally are monster hunting bounty hunters. They kill monsters for bounty. They're considered lower class, but yeah, they're badasses. They can kill pretty much anything that they come across. Like, your average character can kill maybe 2 or 3 animates by himself. This guy can probably take on 10 to 15 alone.
And then the last one in the core book is a Mourner. This one I think is the most limited of all the characters you could play because it is usually a female. It's very rarely a male, and when you could play a male, but most people don't. It's basically they are there to be bodyguards for the aristocrats for the most part. Their job is to take a vow of celibacy and watch over the dead to make sure they don't come back as animates. And even though they have things like, you could be someone's bodyguard, or you could be part of a special society, they're really very limited in what you could be because they have a very specific role in the world.
If you don't like smashing the heads of dead people, this class isn't for you.
Exactly. So, and if you don't like playing a gothic beauty, then this class isn't for you.
If your entire goal is to wear corsets, this is your class.
Yeah, exactly.
What everyone else does, so you're missing out.
Yeah.
Also, you're basically a nun. You have all the traits of being a nun.
If you want to be a zombie-killing nun, go for it. Otherwise, you might want to consider something else.
Like
So yeah, that's basically the sorts of characters you can make. Now, for the way the game plays, it's a 2d10 system. Everything, you just roll 2d10, add your skill, that's it. It's really, really simple in that regard, and really easy to pick up and learn.
And you should also say that during character creation, you're not married to your class's stereotype. You can points how you will.
Yeah, John, why don't you talk about that?
Well, basically, as a doctor, I didn't care at all about being good at medicine. I think you get 2 points in medicine for free, and I never put any more in it. People would come to me for help, and I'd go, I have drugs and homunculi. Do you want those? I'll give you those. So I was not an asset to the party until my homunculi skill raised enough that I made a small man named Piggly, who was our assistant. He was half pig. It's fine.
Oh, hi, Krieger.
Got to get the cheap parts, all right? I'm not a rich doctor because I don't actually have any patients.
Yeah.
Yeah. On top of that, there's things called qualities of independence, which are basically like good things and bad things that are like perks and quirks to your character that can range from anything from like physical bonuses to just societal things that you have going for you. There are all sorts of things that make for a really well-rounded character. So
for the same number of points, you can be Andre the Giant, or you can own a small business. Like, that's how weird the qualities get.
And you could be both.
You could be both.
We had a friend she played a mourner, actually, but she went down the route of she was spurned by her lover, so when he and his family made it out like he was dead, so she joined the police force, and she happened to take the impediments of midget and albino.
And the quality of haunting beauty, so she was the kawaii midget mourner.
She was a character from that Edgar Allan Poe story with the midget.
She would jump off crates and just take her exculpi and go like this to zombies, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
She was awesome.
So basically the way the game plays, like I said, 2d10 system, add skill, roll 2d10, add skill, done. That's it. That's all there is to the minute-to-minute gameplay. For combat, it's just as simple. Roll 2d10 to hit, roll 2d10 for location, roll 2d10 for damage. And the damage is a wounding system, so you can get anywhere from a flesh wound to straight-up kill shot. So this game runs very lethal, and while it's fun, it is very fun, and while it may be really lethal, it still is pretty fair because the PCs have ways of avoiding death through the use of what's called rerolls and what's called Devil's Luck, which is basically saying, GM, get me out of this situation because I'm going to die, and as well as the fact that while it's lethal, it goes both ways. So the PC, it may be lethal for the PCs, but it's just as lethal for the enemies. So you can just go bang, 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 and everyone's dead.
Actually, there are two things we should discuss before we move on to that. Is the stunts and the corruptions. You were kind of talking on the corruptions for a little bit, but we should go into more depth of how that actually does play into your character creation and does decide facts about your character. So you have a corruption path, which they're pretty limited, but they give you a lot of some openness to what they could be, like an addiction, or cursed, or monstrous,
or an obsession.
And then there's things like killer instinct, and if you die, you can spend a point of corruption and come back, but that means you gain a level in that, and you become worse at that. So if you have an addiction to smoking 1 pack a day, if you gain another level, you're smoking 2 packs a day.
And if you're not smoking those things, then you're taking you're taking worse and worse penalties to your regular gameplay, making it much harder to do anything as this character.
And by the time you reach the 5th level, you've basically smoked yourself to death.
Yeah. So once you go past level 5 in any corruption, then you become an NPC or you just automatically die.
Right. And then the other thing is stunts, and this is where you really get to customize your character, and we were kind of talking about that a little bit, but within each class, you have different stunts you could take. So, what's the best example for this?
The best example is the Undertaker's stunt, bullet to the brain. So Undertakers get this one stunt that lets them basically say, I'm going to shoot this thing in the head, and I'm not going to take any penalty for it. Now, shooting something in the head is probably the most lethal thing you can do because it like adds a whole like quarter of damage just automatically onto your already stupid damage to kill something. So like you need to roll a 20 with bonuses. You need to roll a 21 to kill something on 2d10. So you add 5 to that. You're really strong. You're suddenly much more likely to kill that thing outright in one shot. And these guys can do it for free. That's nuts. You know?
And then, okay, I think another example I would say was if within the detective. So we talked about how a detective can be anything from a private eye to investigative journalist to police force or just etc. And that's where the stunts really do come in because you'll have, let me find the page, stunts that will give you police connections, they'll give you connections to people, so you'll have like, there is an investigative journalist stunt, and you take that, you're a journalist. But then you could take something like police detective, that actually is right there, they're both there. And then you can get things like keen-eyed, nothing escapes your line of sight. So I love the investigative journalist stunt.
Yeah, so there's lots of things these things really help define what your character class does. They give you bonuses to help you do the things that your class should be doing. They make it so that you're better than other people at what you're supposed to be doing, and it makes you a much more and also helps define your character at the same time, making you a much more well-rounded and strong character.
Plus, it puts you somewhere in the party. That detective stunt really helps with the whole party didn't pass the perception check problem.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now that we've talked about characters and how the game plays, let's move on to like what sorts of stories you can tell as a GM with the system. Because some people are like, well, that this world sounds cool and all, but what can I do with it? As a GM, what sorts of stories can I tell? Because I'm not building the world, so I'm not building the world myself. So how do I tell some stories with it? And there's tons of things you can do. Like I said. You could do a noir story. You could do detective. You could be detectives for the police force, solving mysteries and routing out anarchists. You could be hunting monsters as lower class people. You could be working through the machinations of the aristocrats and the upper class. There's all sorts of things you can do with this. So you're a GM. You love GMing this system. So what are some of your things that you would suggest?
Okay, so Steven loves to do detective stories. It's his favorite thing. One of his favorite sessions, I think I've played it twice now, is an anarchist ring, where we get to just kill as many anarchists as we like. I personally love anarchy, so I tend to add it to my plots a lot. At one point we had this huge open world game, and John can tell you something about it. But one of my plots in that was princess got kidnapped by anarchists, and they had to go rescue her. I had a game where they were theater people who got mixed up in, was it vampire? It was just crazy. We're actually on starting this Sunday, we're going to try and do parlor LARP because it does lend itself very nicely to a social setting. And for that, we're going to play with secret societies and see how that goes. And then, John, you want to talk more about the open world game?
The things I remember most distinctly was that you shouldn't have 30 people playing at the same time. It took an hour to decide to leave a pub, and it resulted in my character just walking out. And then I got into a big argument over whether I can discharge my firearm 6 times into a room full of bad guys. Not shoot them. That would cost action points. No, I just want to press a button 6 or 8 times to empty this revolver so the party will do something. But we did save the princess, so I think I'm a hero.
Jimbo is the best hero who committed suicide with one of the most powerful guns in the game.
You had enough.
Wait. We need to do the social aristocrat party because we've played that one 3 times now.
All right, let's talk about that. So basically, we did a story. We basically have this one thing that's practically a module for us at this point. Where basically the party goes to an aristocratic party. A lost day happens, which is basically when because London is super smoggy to the point where everyone has to wear gas masks all over the place all the time, unless they're indoors, which is why on the front cover the guy is wearing a gas mask. But so a lost day happens. The lost days are when the smog gets so thick that you can't see your hand in front of your face like this.
And it will kill you if you
step outside. And it will kill you if you're outside. It will clog up your filters within like a half an hour and force you to change them really often, which is no good. So basically, everyone is forced to stay inside the party until the lost day passes. Now, as you're at the lost day, various events start happening. You start finding out that there's something going on with like a bunch of this girl's looking for her sister who was kidnapped. She's somehow a slumber who somehow got into this thing. You still don't know how, but her sister got kidnapped. You find out a bunch of kids were getting grabbed off the streets in the slums, and you start it starts pointing towards this lord who's running the party, and whatever happens. But in the meantime, it's basically an open world. It's basically a sandboxy sort of party, to the point where the first time we ran it, the entire almost like every aristocrat at that party got murdered because John here decided it would be a good. Well, no. John, our mutual friend Eston, decided it would be a good idea to jump out a window, which let the lost day smog in. And John here just said, you know what, screw it. I can't be affected by this smog because I'm a half-lifer and practically half dead. So I don't care. Start looting the place and round everyone up into the ballroom and let them all die from the smog.
You see, he was a Dampier. We only had to kill one guard to open the ballroom doors. And then who would dare cross us? We were carrying paintings and statues right out the front door.
In fact, I think you convinced some of the guards that it would be a good idea to start looting the place because they weren't getting paid.
Yeah. Eston passed the charisma check, and then I used that influence to be like, you clearly don't have a job because someone started a fire upstairs. So you better just take what you can get and leave. The rest of the party was fighting some pyrokinetic upstairs, and Eston and I just were totally uninterested. Billy heard children screaming, and I'm like, fine. So I stole those children.
And Eston grabbed the children and adopted them, and it was adorable.
But actually, at this party, there's 2 of my favorite recurring NPCs. We have a lot of recurring things we do in this system because we play it so often. But one of them is a Dampier, part of the Nocturne Society, which is a vampire hunting society.
Mm-hmm.
And how PC? I mean, not PC. How PG does this video have to be?
Not super, I guess.
I swear, drink and smoke. You do you.
So this character, basically, every single time I played her, she's always somehow ensnared a male PC into a BDSM relationship.
and then drinks their blood when they're having sex.
So she's one of my favorites, and then sometimes she'll convince them to join her society, sometimes not. Another one is the journalist who is at the party, who, if you kill everyone at the party, will write you up in the newspaper.
Yep, that's another one.
That's
So yeah,
one
there's
of the times
plenty
when
of
you don't want your
stories.
character to have giant glowing red eyes, because I fit the description and no one else in the entire city did, and it was me who killed those people. But they had no reason to think it was me, because I wasn't even invited to the party.
So yeah, there's lots of stories you can tell with this, ranging from social to actual to just like, hunting monsters to solving mysteries to exploration, even if you want to do that. There's all sorts of things you can do with it. Tons of stories you can tell.
You can even do haunted house.
You can even do a haunted house with the Necropolis book, which we'll talk about on another episode of this. But for now, we need to wrap this up. So from Table Knights Entertainment, we're going to wish you a goodbye and may your rolls always be high, and come back and watch the next episode of Steven Recommends when it comes out. So we'll see you all later, and support Child's Play, as Aaron will want me to tell you guys. So see y'all later.